Good morning, guys. Welcome to my unboxing and review of the high-grade Zaku 2 F-Type Solari. This is a 2024 standard release that I got for around $25, which is a little more expensive than an average high-grade in the States. Now, of course, this is going to be a design from the Requiem for Vengeance Netflix series, which I haven't seen, but the designs were pretty polarizing, at least for the Gundam EX Online. In general, people were more accepting of the Zaku 2 Solari because this is pretty much the same Zaku 2 we all know and love, with much more surface detail than we're used to, and a different color scheme. I did end up grabbing a set of G-Rework water slide decals for the Zaku 2 Solari, which look pretty good here. The only thing I'm a little iffy on are these stripes here, because I know these are supposed to be like dirt details that go on the feet or something. I might just omit them because I think they look a little weird, as we'll see when I show off the painted build on the bottom of the box. It does not look very good, but anyway, getting right into it, of course, this is going to be a slight kind of painting style, a little less painting-y than a lot of other HGUC boxes in recent years, but that's kind of in line for, I guess, the grittier aesthetic of Requiem for Vengeance. Of course, on the bottom here, we will be getting the full painted build of the Zaku 2 Solari, which, again, I don't know how well you can see that, but the kind of dirt detailing on the feet looks very odd. The claw marks on the toes are also a little weird. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about them. I like the design in general, it's just these decal choices are certainly something. And then, of course, we get some advertisement of the articulation and gimmicks of the Zaku 2 Solari here, showing off that the energy pipes are going to be flexing along with the legs, and then of course showing off that the articulation is quite good and you can replicate a number of different poses, including two-handing the Zaku machine gun here very easily. Again, it mentioning that a lot of the detail in the armor, both geometrically and in terms of surface detail, have been recreated, and showing off the other details of this kit being the shoulder shield, the hand option parts, and the heat hawk. And then, of course, some articulation gimmicks on the kit itself with enhanced articulation in things like the feet, shoulders, and legs, and a movable mono eye with a bit of a unique detailed kind of three-section design there, which looks pretty good. And then, of course, the markings here to kind of replicate a bit of weathering, but again, being standard sticker-style decals, they aren't going to be looking too great, which is why I have the water slides. And then, of course, on the back, same as the Gundam EX, we have some advertising for the Requiem for Vengeance series that came out last year on Netflix. So, of course, inside the box, we will get 3 bags of runners, but I am expecting that the designers of this kit are making the most of their relatively limited parts count compared to how detailed the design is, and this build is going to be pretty good, I'm expecting. Of course, we will be getting our standard HGUC style manual here with a full page spread of the painted build of the Zaku 2 Solari. Again, MSO6F, it is a Zaku. It is 18 meters tall, which I think is like half a meter taller than a normal Zaku. I thought they were like 17.5 meters tall. But again, that's in line with the Gundam EX being half a meter taller than the standard Gundam. And then, of course, we get our usual armaments here, the Zaku machine gun, heat hawk, shoulder shield, and a shield gun, which is a little bit unique. We are notably missing the Zaku bazooka that comes with a lot of Zaku kits, but I don't think it's the biggest deal in the world. Then on the back here, we get some information on the Zaku 2 Solari itself, as well as a lot of the information that we already saw on the box, such as the unique mono eye, and information about things like the Zaku machine gun, shoulder shield, heat hawk, etc. Then we get some lore tidbits on the Principality of Zeon, and then our decal marking guide and color guide on the bottom here. Getting into the manual itself, though, of course, we'll be getting our parts list here, and then, of course, we get right into the build with our torso here. Very similar to the Gundam EX, a very detailed build with a ton of parts layering, which is really nice. I'm not the biggest fan of the Zaku 2. I know it's kind of sacrilegious to say, but hopefully this design kind of warms me up to it a little bit with how nice this build is. And of course, we get into the head here. The only kind of unique thing with the head design is, of course, the commander antennas here being 2 of them on the sides instead of just the one kind of unicorn horn that goes on the forehead for the commander unit. Then, of course, we get into our arm build here with pretty much a full inner frame, which is very nice. Not exactly what I was expecting, but full inner frame there. Of course, on the right arm, you're going to be building the shoulder shield. Then move on to the left arm. And on the left shoulder, what does look pretty nice is that the spikes are going to be molded directly onto the shoulder, because I've noticed on a lot of Zaku 2 kits that the shoulder spikes, if they're separate parts, are a pretty big loss risk. They do tend to pop off pretty easily, especially something like the Master Grade Zaku 2 2.0. As much as I, in general, like the kits based on that, the shoulder spikes are very annoying to deal with. And of course, we get into the legs here with what looks to be a complete inner frame. Again, quite nice, very detailed build, lots of parts layering, very nice to see in a high grade. Then on the back, we get into the other leg in full color, then the waist, and full assembly. And then of course you get into building the weapons here, starting with the Zaku machine gun, and then the Heat Hawk. Does not look like we're going to be getting two different versions of the Heat Hawk, so if you want to use it, you're gonna have to paint the blade in like kind of metallic orange. If you're not using it, don't paint the blade. And then of course gimmicks for articulating the shield. So also one part that I missed when I was taking things out of the box, there is a insert here talking about an error in the manual for C123 here. Apparently the kind of graphic of it in the original manual is different from what it actually looks like. As you can see here, there's a third peg in the manual that just isn't there on the part, so minor change, but still something that they felt the need to include. So of course, inside the bags we get 7 runners, as well as this marking decal sheet. Again, a lot of dirt details and grime and stuff to make it look a bit weathered, but these are just going to look really awkward on the kit, so I'm definitely preferring the kind of clean look the G rework decals have. I'm probably not going to be using the stripes on them. In kind of conjunction with the aesthetic of the series, this kit is definitely one that if you want it to look its best, you're probably going to want to weather or something. I don't have any weathering fluid or anything on me, so I will not be doing that. But interestingly enough, we don't have any foil color correcting sticker sheets. These stickers for the mono eye are on this decal marking sheet. You can see it right here, these 2 circles here. But in general, these stickers, even the ones that aren't imitating like dirt or grime, aren't going to be looking the greatest on this kit because of how dark the color scheme is. As you can see, it's like brown, black, and red. But getting into the runners themselves, so these runners were printed in October of 2024. So starting with runner A1 here, no multicolored runners in this kit. This is going to be the red for the shoulders and the shoulder shield, in this very kind of dark burgundy color, which is nice. All of these runners, I believe, are going to be unique to the Zaku 2 Solari. Runners B1 and B2 with a shared kind of part here for duplicate parts for, I believe, the legs and feet. But of course, this is going to be all of our main armor parts here in this kind of light, I want it like chocolatey brown. It's a lighter brown that's kind of a weird color that you don't really see all that often. This is definitely a unique color scheme, but we have a bunch of armor parts here for things like the legs, the skirts, the feet, I think parts for the torso, and we have our hand options here. It looks like we're going to be having holding hands, a trigger finger hand, and I think an open expressive hand. Runner C1 here in a kind of very dark navy blue for a bunch of auxiliary parts for things like armor, for things like the skirts, parts for the Heat Hawk, the grenade rack, the shield, the Zaku machine gun, as well as accent armor parts. Runner C2 in this light gray going to be accent armor parts for I think the torso and the bottoms of the feet. And then runners D1 and D2 in this very dark navy blue with this middle section shared between the 2 of them for most of our inner frame parts here that the kit is going to use. So lots of inner frame and joint parts, as well as pretty much all the power piping that we are going to be using on this kit. So with all that out of the way, I will see you after the build. Alright, welcome back. Here's the high-grade Zaku 2 Solari, snap belt, panel lined, and oh boy are there a ton of panel lining opportunities on this kit. Decaled up using G rework decals, and top coated using Mr. Hobby premium flat top coat. So getting right into the build, this kit, I was surprised at how much they were able to cram in with a fairly limited parts count and such a small box, because as you saw, it was pretty typical, like average size for a high grade, but that really goes to show how much Bandai is really kind of min-maxing their kits these days. There's a ton of very nice parts layering and a nearly complete inner frame in this high grade, making the build feel very high quality, as hopefully we'll be able to come across in the time-lapse footage you should be seeing right now. Just a quick note, one of the bulbs in my room went out. There's a light fixture that has 4 bulbs. I thought it was only supposed to have 3 because, well, I moved in last year and I only ever saw 3 bulbs lit up in there. Turns out one was broken the whole time, so hopefully when the next video rolls around with the Full Mechanics Raider, the time-lapse footage will be a little bit better because the lighting conditions will be a little bit better for that. But all of that's to say that this is a quite nice build, no polycap, so this build is incredibly sturdy feeling even before top coating. This kit is remarkably very stable, as you might expect from a Zaku. There's not too much going on that's crazy with this kit, apart from, of course, the very large shoulder shield, but the fairly, I guess, normal body and the large feet really do help to mitigate any kind of unbalancing effect that the shield would have. So this kit is very stable and quite a nice build with a ton of part separation and color separation, and everything just kind of works. This feels like an incredibly nice Zaku 2 build, and it is really up there with the Gundam The Origin Zaku 2. I took a look at the HD CDI Zaku 2 Hymo type. At the time that you're seeing this, I think a week ago about. Watch that video if you haven't seen it yet, but that's an incredibly nice build, and this actually does manage to top it a bit because it removes a lot of the weirdness that kit had with the power piping. a lot of high-grade Zakus, you do have to end up like kinking the power piping in order to have a natural bend around the torso, which leads to certain scenarios like in that video, some pointed out in the comments that I didn't notice until I read the comment that I put the power piping on upside down on the Hi-Mo Zaku 2, which I didn't even know you could do, because a lot of the time Bandai makes it so that you can't put parts in backwards or upside down or anything. And that kit, you can actually put the power piping in backwards. So I did not realize until I saw it. This kit, it is pretty much impossible to do so, I believe. It's going to be very funny if it turns out that some of the piping on like the legs or something are backwards. But the power piping here are non-flexible, non-kinkable, and they're just a solid piece that you plug in, and it's held in very stably, and it looks quite nice. Overall, this kit does avoid a lot of the pitfalls of other older Zaku 2 high grades, including in seam lines, because the only real prominent seam line that you're going to need to clean up is going to be on the front of the forearms. Seems like they haven't really figured out how to fix that on these Zaku 2 kits, because as you can see, there's a pretty prominent seam line near the top of the forearm here. It does fade a little bit as you go down the forearm, at least on the right arm. On the left arm, it is much more noticeable. They did get around the seam line on the shoulder by splitting the shoulder into 3 parts rather than 2, so you can see the seam lines are kind of hidden here, almost as detail lines. I don't know if you'll really feel compelled to clean those up. And there is a pretty big seam line in the back here, although there is a bit of a recessed detail, so I'm not sure if they've concealed it as a panel line or not. But again, I'll leave it up to you if you want to clean that up, because this is a pretty prominent line, but again, a bit of recessed detail. I think it's supposed to be a detail line. So getting into aesthetics then, this is where this kit kind of differentiates itself from a lot of other Zakus, because this is pretty much the most, I guess, realistic, in quotes, take of a Zaku that we've ever seen, the most, I guess, grounded take, as grounded as you can get for a mecha show of the Zaku 2. Of course, this being from the darker, grittier Requiem for Vengeance. So this kit really does change the proportions of the Zaku 2, which you'll see when I do a quick visual comparison of a couple of Zaku 2s later on. Notably, you see it in the shoulders. These shoulders are much larger than other Zaku 2 kits. The spike shoulder is a little bit larger, and the shoulder shield is long enough that it actually covers up everything, including the hand, which is to facilitate the secondary function of it. Of course, there are shield guns in the shoulder shield. I think that's this kit's equivalent of like Vulcan guns that would be on other mobile suits, but this kit can hold onto the handle and stuff, so the shield does need to be long enough so that the kit can reach for the handle and actually hold it. So I do actually really like that the shoulder shield is a much more, I guess, practical and viable defensive option compared to a lot of other Zaku 2s, where the shoulder shield kind of ends here, kind of like at the mid-forearm just past the elbow, and especially the police Zaku, where it just kind of ends at the base of the shoulder. Apart from that, the main proportional difference is that this kit does look a little bit flatter than a lot of other Zaku 2s. I don't really know how to put it, because the Zaku 2 is a kind of bulbous design in general, but this kit seems pretty flat, and you can especially see it in the waist here with how long and wide the skirt armor is. So it does look like the Zaku 2's been squished a little bit, which I think is a little weird around the waist section. That aesthetically weirds me out a little bit. But apart from that, I do really like how this kit looks. The color scheme a little bit less so. I kind of do want to get another one of these and repaint them in the standard Zaku 2 colors, because the light fudge and brick red combination of colors is not something I'm the biggest fan of. I like the brick red on the shoulders. The light fudge brown tone for the majority of this kit, not so much. I don't know what it is. It's personal preference, of course. If you like this color scheme, more power to you, but I am not the biggest fan of it. Of course, getting into stickers now, I did apply pretty much all of the major decals and most of the minor decals. The only main thing I'm missing are the lines that are supposed to go all over the feet here. It's supposed to replicate, I think, like Zimmerit coating or something like that kind of like wavy stripe pattern. But if you're going to do that, you might as well go all the way and use plow plate and kind of engrave the pattern onto the legs, because I think even in waterslide decal form, those stripes look pretty rough in the feet. Apart from that, and apart from the insignias on this kit, there are really only 2 major color correcting stickers you're going to have to use from this sticker sheet. Of course, that being sticker 25, which is going to be for the mono eye in there, and this kind of unique tri-section pattern that you don't really see in other Zaku 2s, and the other one being sticker 18, which is going to be for the yellow stripe and black kind of top for the middle spike on the shoulder shield. Now, I used the water slide for this, but as you can see, it's a folding decal, so it's going to look pretty rough on the top, and I don't think the normal sticker style one is going to look much better. Honestly, this is probably like, you should definitely just paint that in. It's a fairly small detail, and it's marked off pretty clearly, so it should be easy enough to mask off. Other stickers are going to be the usual kind of marking stickers and things like that, and the sticker sheet does replicate a lot of, I guess, gunk, grime, dirt that's going to be all over this kit. Unfortunately, though, if you use these stickers, it's only going to be covering some parts of the kit in like the shoulders and the feet and the chest. Everything else is going to be pretty clean, which is going to lead to a pretty odd look that kind of clashes with itself. So if you want to gunk up this kit, just go ahead and do some proper weathering to it. This is definitely a design that looks fantastic with weathering, similar to like all the 8th MS team kits. The Requiem for Vengeance kits do seem to lend themselves better to a full weathered build. Of course, for a quick size and visual comparison, here is the high-grade Zaku 2 Solari next to two different Zaku 2s. Of course, the HD Crew Cruise Doan's Island Zaku 2 Haimo type on the left there, and the high-grade Police Zaku on the right. So, kind of ignoring the Police Zaku for a second because this is a radically different design language. Taking a look at these two, because I think the Gundam The Origin Zaku is, I guess, the most comparable in terms of design language to the Zaku 2 Solari, both being, I guess, more realistic and detailed takes on the Zaku. Of course, the Solari going whole hog with all of these insane panel lines. If you feel obligated to panel line but don't like doing it, you need to avoid this kit. There are just so many panel lines all over this kit, as you saw when it was spinning around, and as you see now, there's just so many opportunities to panel line, and it did take me a while. I just used standard like marker style panel liner, so that was a bit tedious, but I think the end result does look very good, especially after a top coat. So getting to the visual comparison, you can really see what I was talking about with the proportions of the shoulder shield here, with the Zaku 2 Solari's shoulder shield kind of extending down past the hands, and including these like spike details here for use as an emergency melee weapon, while the standard, more normal Zaku 2 shoulder shield here ends just past the kit's elbow. So again, proportionally showing off how the shoulders are a bit larger, and again how the skirts are noticeably longer and wider than the normal Zaku 2s here. If I lift the rifle a little bit, you can see that the skirts, again, look longer and look a bit squished. So again, the proportions are a little bit odd on that, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. While the waist does weird me out in general, I really do like the proportions of this kit and this kind of tweaked version of the Zaku 2 we all know and love, minus the wolf ear antennas, of course. Not the biggest fan of those, but it is another thing that makes it a bit unique. Of course, for accessories, here's the high-grade Zaku 2 Solari with everything it comes with. Now, this accessory list is a little bit sparse. You are missing one major kind of, I guess, regular accessory that comes with a lot of high-grade Zakus. We'll get to that in a moment. But of course, starting with our hand options here, you're going to get a set of standard high-grade holding hands that double as fists or can be used to hold the Heat Hawk, and you will get 2 extra hand options. You will get an open expressive hand for the left side that I believe doubles as the holding hand for the secondary handle of the Zaku machine gun. This kit, unlike many other high-grade Zakus, doesn't hold on to the secondary handle with just the holding hand. It uses this instead to kind of loosely mimic the idea that it's holding on to the secondary handle. And then you get this trigger finger hand only for the right side, pretty typical of high grades to only include this for one side. The wrist is going to be at a slight angle compared to the normal holding hands, just to facilitate more natural posing, but apart from that, not much to say about this. And of course, for your adapters, you will get this action base adapter that contains your slot for a 3mm peg for an action base, and you get this adapter here that will fit into this slit in the back skirt to hold either the Zaku machine gun or the Heat Hawk, whichever one the kit is not using at the moment. You will get these. I thought these were supposed to be like cracker grenades or something. I haven't seen Requiem for Vengeance, but I thought these were the cracker grenades you see on a lot of different Zakus, but no, these are actually wire-guided missiles, similar to the ones in the chest of the Blue Destiny Unit 1, so you can mount these onto either of the legs. You will get your Heat Hawk here. This contains the one color inaccurate part of this kit. Of course, the blade will need to be painted in a metallic orange if you want to show it active. Unfortunately, you only get one of these. You don't get another one for if the Heat Hawk is stored, so you really have to choose whether or not you want to paint this or not, because it will look a bit unnatural when it's kind of stored, but the blade is still active, so I've chosen to paint it in because it doesn't really bother me all that much, but if it does bother you, it's just something to keep in mind. And then you get your Zaku machine gun here, which is slightly different from a normal Zaku machine gun. So as you can see, or as you can hopefully see, my hands aren't getting in the way too much, this Zaku machine gun for the Zaku 2 Solari is going to be a little bit longer than your standard Zaku machine gun. The secondary handle is going to be a rectangular handle rather than the cylindrical one, and the magazine is going to be offset a little bit to the side, and it's going to be larger than your normal Zaku machine gun. Apart from that, this is a pretty standard Zaku machine gun. The scope here does not move. This is actually, I think this is color accurate, because on the painted build in the back, I didn't notice this in any different color. And of course, the secondary handle will move to the side for more stable firing. So this pretty much includes almost everything you would expect it to. The one thing that's really missing is the Zaku Bazooka. That is pretty standard with most high-grade Zakus. The pre-Bandai variants, I think the LeSean's Zaku 2 does come with it, so I find it a bit odd that it was omitted from this kit, but for the, I think, around like $20 price tag that most places are charging for this kit, it's not the biggest deal in the world, especially with how nice the rest of this kit is. So getting into articulation, then starting of course with the head, for an upward look, you can actually look the Zaku 2 Solari up quite far. This is, normally the Zakus do struggle a bit with head articulation given how flat the head is and how not conducive it is to proper neck movement, but this kit can look up a decent amount for a Zaku. It can look down about the same amount. You will get pretty much no side to side tilt, extremely minor. And then of course you can 360 this kit about the ball joint. Just be careful that you don't snap the antennas off, they are a bit fragile. For the shoulders then, you will of course get a shoulder swing outwards, a decent 45-degree swing. Not quite as nice as the HG CDI Zaku 2 high mount type, but still a decent shoulder swing. It can swing backwards a small amount. It can of course articulate independent of the arm to facilitate a just under 90-degree side raise, so not the greatest. The arm can of course 360 about the peg. Full rotation in the upper bicep. A double bend in the elbow will give nearly 180-degree bend before the hand collides with the shoulder, and the wrist is going to be on a ball joint. On the right shoulder then, of course, this shield is going to be able to rotate and pivot and swing and all of that nice stuff, and there's a secondary handle in this shield that will swing out for when you want to pose the Zaku 2 Solari, firing the shield guns in the shield. In the torso then, for a forward ab crunch, you will get a minor ab crunch forward and a minor ab crunch backwards. You will get some very minor side-to-side crunch, and this kit should be able to 360 except for the backskirt getting in the way, so at most you will get barely like a 20 to 30 degree pivot to either side, which isn't the greatest. In the skirts then, the front skirts will raise up 90 degrees. Of course they come together on the runner and you cannot really clip them apart given how they're designed. The side skirts can raise up about 45 degrees, and the back skirt is going to be fixed in place. In the legs then, there is a hip drop mechanism for each individual leg that lets you drop the leg for better kick articulation. As you can see there, it's on a bit of a rotating joint inside of there. So of course, if you drop the leg all the way, for front kicks, you will get about 90 degrees. For back kicks, you will get under 45 degrees. And for side kicks, you will get 90 degrees. So pretty typical kick articulation if you drop the leg all the way. You will of course get full rotation in the upper thigh. A double joint in the knee will give you just over 90 degrees of bend. In the feet then, this foot armor will slide in and out to look more natural as you articulate the foot. For vertical bend, you can bend it down a small amount, upwards very little. You can pivot the foot to either side a very minor amount, and for side rotations you will also get a very small amount of articulation. So overall articulation on the Zaku 2 Solari is decent, if decidedly pretty average across the board, except for the head, which is much nicer than your typical Zaku 2. So let's see articulation in action and some poses. Getting the high-grade Zaku 2 Solari into a bit of a spin, starting with the usual running and gunning pose. Here I have it running, firing the shield guns off to the side with the heat hawk in the left arm as it's just kind of trotting along. And unfortunately, this pose looks kind of awful. I was expecting it to look a lot better, especially with the large feet and how stable this kit is, and while it's normally pretty stable, it does have some problems in a one-legged pose, namely the foot it's actually standing on can't really balance in the way you would want it to, in combination with the underwhelming like side raise for the arms that also limits how natural it looks actually firing the shield guns, which is a little unfortunate because it's a pretty unique armament and I was considering posing it firing it on the shelf, but now I don't really think that's an option, especially because the secondary handle on the shield actually snapped off. So the connection of it into the shield is actually pretty fragile and does pop out pretty easily. So at one point when I was trying to pop it back in, I stressed it a little bit too much and it snapped in half. So just keep in mind that that part is pretty fragile, and if you get this kit, just to treat it with care. I was not expecting it to be as fragile as it was, and it's a very annoying part because while it's pretty difficult to, I found it pretty difficult to actually put into the shield in the actual proper spot, it did pop out very easily. So it's just something to keep in mind that this kit doesn't look the greatest in a running and gunning pose. While it looks good on the ground, it's definitely a lot better, more stationary or in a bit of a slower movement being expressed because of, again, this being a slightly more grounded, realistic take, I guess, on the Zaku. So a super dynamic running and gunning pose wouldn't really fit the theming of this kit the greatest. In addition, the limited ability to kind of fire in line with itself, and at best you can have these shield guns firing downwards a little bit. You can see I have the torso articulated kind of in a bit of a side crunch and the arms up as far as they can go, and it still doesn't look great. So yeah, this is not really something I would consider posing it doing on the shelf. So here is the Zaku 2 Solari crouching with firing the Zaku machine gun in a two-handed pose upwards at a target, and this is an alright pose. However, you do see what I was talking about earlier with the heat hawk looking pretty awkward if you decide to paint in the blade, because again, you only get the one heat hawk, you don't get like a stored version of it. So having it just with the blade active on the back skirt does look pretty weird. If I were to pose it doing this on the shelf, I would definitely just remove the heat hawk and not have it on the kit, or have it in the offhand and have it firing the Zaku machine gun one-handed. But anyway, this kit no surprise with how stable it was. It really can hold this kneeling pose very nicely. The hip drop mechanism does prevent the kind of tilting that a lot of kits get when you have them kneeling. Normally the torso will be kind of tilted to one way, and you need a very nice side crunch for it to kind of return to it being in line and not tilted. This kit, because of the hip drop, it does not suffer from that issue, so that is a definite big plus in its favor, especially because the hip drop is for each leg, which really does help this kit. And it does look really good firing the Zaku machine gun. Not with the offhand, though. As you probably see spinning this around, it's not actually really gripping onto the secondary handle. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong, but the way the secondary handle is, it really just kind of floats there above the handle, and it looks pretty awkward unless you're looking at it from a very specific angle. It's a little bit odd to me that they opted for this kind of design over just being able to use the normal holding hand, which I did try, but it didn't really work. Just an odd design choice with the Zaku machine gun here, where the secondary handle doesn't really look natural being held, which is a shame because, again, with this more realistic, grounded, I guess a bit of a slower take on the Zaku 2, it really would benefit from this two-handed pose to emphasize the power of the Zaku machine gun, that it needs a second hand gripping it for extra stability. So while this is definitely something I would consider posing it doing on the shelf, it is limited a little bit by the unnaturalness of the offhand gripping the secondary handle. And of course, getting it into the air here, doing an aerial slash with the Heat Hawk. This looks actually surprisingly good. Because of the adjusted proportions of the Heat Hawk, I neglected to show it off in the accessory section, but this Heat Hawk is noticeably a little bit longer and larger than other Heat Hawks. So what that allows the Zaku to do is actually grip the handle a little bit lower on the shaft. That gives it a little bit more reach and makes it look a little more natural swinging this Heat Hawk. Normally, especially if you watched my video on the HGCDI Zaku 2 High-Mo type, the way that kit has to choke up on the Heat Hawk handle, where its hand is basically behind the blade, is really awkward looking, and I'm not really a fan of it. This looks a bit more practical, a bit more natural, and I definitely love the proportions of this Heat Hawk a lot more than that one, and the Heat Hawk on the Police Zaku 2 as well, which also suffers from a similar issue to the High-Mo Zaku's Heat Hawk. But this kit also looks surprisingly good in the air for a Zaku. That definitely looks his best on the ground in either more defensive or slower looking poses. This very dynamic aerial pose also suits it a fair amount. This is definitely a rare case where I would consider posing the Zaku actually swinging the Heat Hawk at something, especially after you paint the blade a metallic orange with how large it is and all of the detail on the blade. I know it's kind of hard to see in the posing section, but there is plenty of surface detail on the blade that looks really nice, and I think the Zaku machine gun definitely looks a lot more natural being mounted on the back skirt rather than the Heat Hawk. So yeah, this is definitely something I would consider posing this kit doing if I were to have it in the air. It's one of the only poses I would actually consider doing in the air besides the iconic kind of like downward leaping two-handed Zaku machine gun pose, but again, that does have a little bit of issues with looking natural, like I mentioned earlier with the secondary handle. So in conclusion, the high-grade Zaku 2 Solari is a surprisingly great kit for how kind of polarizing the Requiem for Vengeance actual designs are, especially the Gundam EX. I know there was a lot of discourse online about people going back and forth on whether or not the Gundam EX was a good design. I'll make a video on that at some point. Make sure to sub and hit the notification bell so you don't miss that. But the Zaku 2 Solari was received a bit more warmly, and I could definitely see why. It strays significantly less from the traditional Zaku design that a lot of people know and love than the Gundam EX does. So this is essentially a pretty normal Zaku 2 with some tweaked proportions. Of course, it's going to have much larger shoulders, namely the shoulder shield is going to actually be able to extend down like past the hand, which really makes it look a lot better as a practical defensive option compared to a lot of other Zaku 2 shields. In addition, the spike shoulder shield is a bit large. Unfortunately, the color correcting decal or water slide decal, if you decide to get the water slides for this kit, really doesn't fit or look great on the middle spike with the yellowish orange stripe in the middle with a black tip. So that's definitely something I would recommend to paint it yourself. Because of it being kind of molded onto the kit as panel line details, it should be pretty easy to mask off and just paint in yourself. Speaking of panel lines, this kit's most distinct visual feature, besides of course the color scheme, is going to be the nearly excessive amount of panel lines on this kit. This kit has an absolute ton of surface detail, and if the Gundam EX didn't exist, I would say it was probably the most surface detail we've ever seen in a high grade. That kit has a little bit more geometric detail if I'm remembering right, but this kit, in terms of just pure panel lining details, absolutely crazy. If you feel obligated to panel line all of your kits but hate doing it, you definitely should avoid this kit. You are going to drive yourself crazy panel lining everything if you don't like panel lining, but I really do think it's worth the effort. This kit really does look great when you fill in all of those lines, and you can really see all of the care and detail that Bandai put into replicating all the details on this design from the Requiem for Vengeance show. In addition, the build is quite nice. I would actually say it's a little bit nicer than the Gundam the Origin Zaku 2, and that's a fantastic Zaku build. This has a very nice amount of parts layering. It has a nearly complete inner frame, which is quite impressive. Everything just kind of works and feels sturdy, with the exception of the secondary handle on the shield, which did break after one use by me. So that's just something to keep in mind with this kit. In terms of the color scheme, again, it's all personal preference. I'm not the biggest fan of the light fudge and brick red color scheme, but if you're a fan of it, more power to you. In terms of accessories, this comes with almost everything you would expect it to. It is lacking a Zaku bazooka, which is a pretty common staple in most Zaku 2 kits, so I find that exclusion to be a little bit odd, especially considering it was included in the P Bandai bundle. I think it was the Lashan Zaku 2 F-Type, but it being absent here is a little bit strange. In addition, the hand options aren't the greatest, with the kind of open expressive hand for the left arm not really acting like a natural like gripping hand for the secondary handle of the Zaku machine gun like the manual says it's supposed to. It really just kind of floats there and looks a bit awkward. Again, if I'm doing something wrong, let me know in the comments, but when I was posing this kit, it was really just annoying to use and didn't look all that great. In terms of posing, this is this kit's weakest point. While it has decidedly average posing in a number of spots, there are a few places where it really could be better. In terms of side raises in the arm, I really wish it could do at least 90 degrees, especially if you want to pose it firing the shield gun. I really feel like that running and gunning pose would look fantastic if only it could raise its arm a little bit more. In addition, the leg articulation, while the hip drop is incredibly nice and in general the leg articulation is great, it isn't the greatest in a one-legged pose. I find it kind of hard to articulate, see what I did there, exactly where it falls short in terms of that one-legged pose. I believe it's in the ankles, not being able to tilt the foot far enough forward to actually like kind of like throw the body forward like it's actually like running full force. Makes it look significantly less natural than it normally would, and the kind of trotting pose that it can pull off and does look pretty good in normally doesn't look great in while it's gunning off to the side with the shield guns. All of that is to say that apart from articulation, this is a pretty fantastic kit, and definitely looks a lot better with weathering. This is definitely a design that really lends itself to weathering, so if you want to do like your first weathering build or whatever, this is a pretty no-brainer go-to kit to do as your first one, alongside things like the Gundam ground type or the gym ground type or the Easy 8 or anything like that. So would I recommend this kit? Absolutely. This is a fantastic high grade in general and a great representation of the Zaku too. Wonky proportions in the hips aside, I really do think this has something for most people, whether it's just to add another Zaku 2 to your collection, whether it's to just kind of admire the surface detail of this kit, whether it's to make a full weathered build that this design lends itself really well to. This kit really does have something for everyone, and it's something I could really recommend to pretty much anyone, especially for the price point. You can regularly find this kit for a little over $20, which is very reasonable for what you get in this box, and it's definitely a fantastic addition to any collection. So that was my review of the high-grade Zaku 2 Solari. What did you think of this kit? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, give it a like. If you like videos like these, make sure to sub and hit the notification bell, and I'll see you next time with my review of the Full Mechanics Raider Gundam. I'll see you then.